Welcome to the College Football Junkies podcast. This is our first episode. My name is Mark, co-host Montana. You may know us previously off of the Connor and Heffernan show. So this is a totally brand new show. We are so excited to be here. We're going to go over some of the things, that have already happened in college football. Couple of games happened last night. First game we'll go over is the number 2 Oregon Ducks um, going going to play against a pretty beaten up Purdue Boilermaker team. Not very good this year. The whole question was, with Oregon traveling over, to Indiana to play Purdue, is that atmosphere going to get to Oregon a little bit? It did not. Oregon beat Purdue 35-0. Dylan Gabriel had a pretty solid game, all told. He went 21 of 25, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. They didn't do a whole lot running the ball, 10 carries for 50 yards. And then you look over at Purdue. It was pretty competitive. I I would say all told, the most competitive quarter would probably be the third quarter. But they were pretty competitive in the first half. It was 21-0 at half. There were chances for Purdue to get into the game, especially after the interception that Gabriel threw. What are your thoughts on this Oregon Ducks team? Because, man, it seems like after they beat Ohio State, they're ultimately the favorite, likely to win the Big Ten Conference this year.
I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. First of all, I see a comment from Sports Maniac saying they thought Purdue could pull it off because they're an upset team. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't think, with how Oregon's been playing this season, I thought Oregon would realistically do it. But that Purdue is definitely a team that is known for upsets and pulling games off and pulling wins off, especially when the atmosphere and everything is right. It was not right in this case. I mean, Oregon dominated the entire game, and I don't want to say that. I mean, this definitely they've had much way higher intensity matchups even just this season, and they'll continue to have way higher intensity matchups than what they had in Purdue. But I think getting over the hump after beating such a high caliber team and then going and not sleepwalking, I think that just proves that this Oregon team is legit, and I think they have the legs to have an undefeated regular season. Because I do believe they could win out. Could they possibly drop one of their last games? Of course they could. It's college football. Anything could happen. But I think they proved that they're not going to sleepwalk any game. And so I feel like we definitely could be talking about them being an undefeated team by the end of the season. But shout out to Oregon. They're playing great football. I really think they're one of the teams that has had one of the most seamless transitions with a conference switch, but obviously that's because top to bottom, this Oregon team is especially just an offensive juggernaut. They are such a well-controlled, well-coached team, and so shout out to Oregon. Man, I'm glad we don't play them regular season this year. I'm not gonna lie. We have Ohio State to worry about, so that's I think enough of a top 5 matchup to worry about. But no, shout out to Oregon. I think they've got the legs to go undefeated. Again, could they drop a game or two? Of course they could, but I think they definitely are going to win out for the rest of the season.
Now, you're saying could they maybe drop a game or two? I'm going to rattle off, the remaining games on their schedule this year. On the 26th, next week, they play against number 22 Illinois. Number 22 Illinois is going over to Eugene. Illinois is playing some good football. We'll be talking about them here in a little bit. They go to Michigan, play at the Big House. That could be an interesting chess match, too. They play up against Maryland, at Wisconsin, which could also be very interesting. There's been all this talk about, traveling 2 or more time zones to playing some of these games, and how the teams that have to travel, they have a losing record. I think it's like a 1-9 record traveling over 2 time zones. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. But as far as, a team making a seamless transition, I mean, we'll talk about them later too. The Texas Longhorns have seemed to make a pretty seamless transition over to the SEC.
Man.
Oregon has made a very much so seamless transition over to the Big Ten. Everybody's question and thought process was, well, the Big Ten's a physical conference to play in, and all told, it is. But I tell you what, last year Oregon showed that they're one of the more physical teams in the country, as far as their defense and as well as their offense goes. So it's going to be interesting to see, how Oregon looks in their test up against Illinois, up against Michigan, because I think that's going to be very tough. And I'm going to even throw in the game against Wisconsin, because Camp Randall is a very tough atmosphere to play in, especially if Wisconsin is playing good football going into that game. So, yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting final 5 games for Oregon for sure.
It will be for sure, without a doubt. I think anything can happen. I definitely think that they could drop a game. I think Illinois, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit. Illinois is a team that they look legit. And again, we're going to cover more of that legitness or how legit they actually are in a little bit, but they definitely look super, super solid. And I definitely can see Oregon possibly dropping that game. But I definitely think, regardless of if they drop a game, we will not see them have any sleeper games. I think they'll keep every game competitive. I don't see them having a sleeper game. Now, again, I could say that now and we could see them pull off a really big loss and call a sleeper game, but I don't see that team doing that. I think this is a team we'll see going deep into the postseason. I really do. I think they're proving that they're that team. But speaking of games last night, moving on to the other game that took place last night. Now, this was a whole different game. This was not a blowout. This was not a one-sided matchup. This was currently ranked 13 BYU, who, shout out to BYU, because they honestly do have a really exciting football program and they do keep it pretty consistent. Have they had their years where they have not been the best? Of course, every program has, but they've kept their team consistent and they are currently 7-0, and they took on Oklahoma State last night, which Oklahoma State were 3-3 going into this matchup, but they honestly, to me, did not look like a 3-3 team. They were a competitive team that I really thought could beat BYU. Obviously, with their record, you could call it an upset. It would have been an upset since BYU is ranked. But I think Oklahoma State is a better team than what their record shows. And so I really thought this was going to be a game that went down to the wire, and it did exactly that. BYU finished 7-0, finished the game with a 7-0 record. I heard a couple of analysts at the beginning of the season that predicted that they were not going to be anywhere close to where they are now. So BYU has definitely performed extremely well. My question to you is, do they continue? Do you see BYU maybe not finishing their season undefeated, but maybe sneaking into that college football playoff talk, as well as finishing with maybe only one loss? How many losses do you see this BYU picking up regular season?
It's going to be interesting. I just pulled up their schedule here. They play at UCF, at Utah, versus Kansas, at Arizona State, and versus Houston. And I tell you what, there is a path where BYU actually finishes undefeated. I could see them beating UCF. I could see them being a Cam Risingless Utah team. I could see them beating Kansas. I could see them beating Arizona State because their quarterback just got hurt. And then Houston's not very good this year. I think they keep it going, man. And I have them at this point in the season. I have them playing in the Big 12 championship. Who they play in the Big 12 championship is going to be interesting because that whole top end of the conference is pretty stacked right now. What are your thoughts? Do you think they keep it going? I think they have the schedule to really make a statement.
Well, our comments are saying they finished number 8. I don't know about that. I think in the schedule that you listed off, I don't think they win out. I think they pick up at least one loss. I think still, one loss. We're talking about a deep bowl game, and depending on when the loss is, who the loss is to, maybe they still make the top 12. Honestly, depending on how everything shakes out, if you're a team with one loss, you might still be in that postseason talk. And even if not, you are definitely in your conference championship. And I think I'm with you. I think BYU no, I don't want to say easily win it, but I think they would handily win that. And I definitely think that they're a team that we need to talk about, not as being a contender for winning the championship, but I definitely think they could be a team that sneaks into that last spot for college football playoffs, possibly. But I have them picking up a loss. Who's that? Who do they pick that loss up to? That I can't say, but throughout those games you listed off, I definitely think they're going to have their hands full for
It's
sure.
if I'm gonna pick a candidate for a loss right now, I would probably say UCF,
Yep.
because that's, at UCF, it's a pretty tough atmosphere. The bounce house at night likely is going to be a pretty tough atmosphere to play in. I have them beating Utah. Losing Cam Rising, who, by the way, just got approved for an 8th year in college football, is crazy. Be- because he got a medical waiver. But I have them going, and beating Utah. I have them beating Kansas. Kansas is probably the most disappointing team of the season is Kansas. After what they did last year, being 1-5, they're 0-3 in conference play. It's kind of like the Kansas of old. It's like you have one decent season and you go right back to being you the next year. But then they go play Arizona State. Arizona State lost their quarterback, and our buddy Jeff Sims, who famously fumbled the ball like 12 times last year for Nebraska, is starting for Arizona State now. So it'll be interesting to see, what Arizona State does with a running quarterback. I think BYU could, do things in their own favor, and beat Arizona State. And I have them beating Houston. Houston is not very good this year. 2-4, 1-2 in the conference. But yeah, I can quite possibly see them dropping UCF. I could see them winning against UCF. So it's going to be interesting to see this team the remainder of the year.
It will be. It really will be. I think UCF. If I was picking one, I think UCF would be that one that I would also pick. But again, you never know. I'm gonna pull a comment right back up that we saw that is pretty funny because it is true. College players are becoming vets. We have a couple players that we're actually going to talk about that are like 7, 8 years. It's crazy. It's interesting. I know injuries and COVID and everything. Like there's reasons for sure, but it is interesting. And we've got some college football vets out here. But
8
moving
years.
on, I know, isn't that's man? That's I don't even know how many classes. I don't know what classes you would even need to take. I'm sure that like
he's already done with his master's at that point, you would think.
Yeah, so it's you kind of you're running out of options. You're really just there for the sports, which is fine. But at that point, I don't know. But again, a lot of these players, all jokes aside, they do have injuries. They do have stuff that went on that prolonged their career. But it is very interesting to see a 7-year. I mean, again, that's you didn't usually used to see that, I don't think, but it is what it is.
Yep.
Moving on away from our Friday slate of games, we are moving on. We've got so many big games to talk about that are going to take place today. Mark, run us off with our first slate. What are we talking about first?
All right. We're talking right at 11 a.m. on ABC. Number 6, Miami at Louisville. And I tell you what, it's pretty interesting game. Cam Ward has Miami playing at a pretty high level right now, but they are going to play at Louisville. All in told, it is a pretty tough place to play. Right now, according to ESPN FPI, Miami has a 56% chance of winning. There's a lot of people saying this could be a 50-50 game. Like I was saying, though, Cam Ward is playing at a ridiculously high level, 148 to 214, 2,219 yards, 20 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. Show for Louisville is 116 for 183, also playing at a pretty high level, efficient level, 1,674 yards, 14 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. These are two teams that don't turn the ball over very much. It's going to be a pretty interesting game. My prediction for this game, I have Miami winning 27 to 24, I think it's going to be really close. What are your thoughts?
First of all, I mean, this is a really, I don't want to say underrated game because I do think people are giving it the respect it deserves because Louisville is not, they're not a ranked team, but they're not a team that is like mid to low tier. They are definitely a higher level unranked team currently, or at least unranked top 25 team. And so they've proved it. They've looked great this season. Miami has struggled on the defensive side and they just have had inconsistencies. They've just had inconsistencies just in singular games where they have had moments where they have not even looked like Miami. So for that reason, I see it being a close back and forth game. Again, Cam Ward is having himself a season. He is by far the best quarterback Miami has seen in a long time. And I think he really, really, really could be one of their best shots at possibly winning a championship or making a push towards a championship. So many great players in college now. Could they have someone else ready to go after him? Of course, but I think he's that guy. I really think he is for that team. So
Yeah.
because of that, I do think that gives Miami an edge, but Louisville does have a really solid and sound offense. And speaking of players that have been in the league for a while, their quarterback has been in the league. Well, seems like it when we're talking about them being vets, but when they've been in college that long, one player that has been in college that long is the Louisville quarterback. He's been on the team for a little while. And all jokes aside, I feel like from the quarterback standpoint, when you are on a team and you build up with a group of guys from start to finish, you really get a whole different thing. So this dude, since he's been there longer, I will say the advantage that it will give a quarterback, and I think we saw that in Georgia with the quarterback. What was it? What was his name? He plays for the Rams now. He doesn't really play, but he's Stetson Bennett. Is that his name?
Stetson Bennett, yeah.
It's kind of an example with that. I think we saw that Georgia team have such an elevated level of success. Obviously, they're just Georgia, but also having a quarterback that really knew the team because he, clocked those minutes in and clocked those plays in. And that Louisville quarterback is the same way. So Louisville is not any slouch on offense. Obviously, they don't have the high caliber that Miami has, but Louisville is not going to get blown out. They're not going to go down 2-3 scores. I don't have an exact score prediction, but I have this being a game that finishes between 30 and 40 points, and I do have Miami being that team that comes out on top. I don't believe this game will be determined by just 3 points. I don't think this will be a field goal. I think this will be a late touchdown drive by Cam Ward. I'm not going to say it's going to be the last 5 seconds, 4 seconds, minute, but I think this is going to end. This is going to be a punch-for-punch game, and then Cam Ward comes out and wins by 7 to 10 points. And I think we're looking at Miami continuing their role. Again, we talked about their inconsistencies, and we've seen their inconsistencies, especially recently. I think we've seen their consistencies more recently than we did at the beginning of the season, honestly. So hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, I'm not a Miami fan by any means, but because it is honestly more fun when Miami is a good, exciting, electric team, I do hope we can see them continue where they've been going, and I think they will with this win over Louisville. And I think now, will they remain a top 10 team the rest of the season? I'm not going to say that for sure, but I definitely think that if they pick up this win over Louisville, they are definitely on the right track to keep the status where they're at right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they come out and take care of business against Louisville, that puts them at 7-0. I want to rattle off, the remaining schedule here really quick. But it is a very favorable schedule. If everything wants to load, nothing wants to load for me right now. There we go. So they play Louisville. They play against Florida State, who could actually go in the conversation of most disappointing team of the year.
Oh my God!
By a long shot. They're so bad.
They're winning that award by a mile right now.
Oh man, 1-6 after an undefeated regular season and getting whooped up on, in the Orange Bowl against Georgia. But they play up against Florida State. They should win that game. It is a rivalry game though, so we'll see. Weird things do happen in rivalries. They play up against a pretty tough Duke team. Duke is making a little bit of noise in the ACC. They are 6-1, 2-1 in the conference right now. You've got Georgia Tech making a little bit of noise. They're 5-2, 3-2 in the ACC. You play they play Wake Forest. They should beat Wake Forest, and then they go to Syracuse, which, oh, by the way, they're also a pretty decent team. So I could see Miami going undefeated potentially. I could see them maybe dropping 2 games, but we're in an era now where it's a 12-team college football playoff to where even if you drop 1 or 2 games, there is a chance that you will still get in, especially if you only lose 1. If you lose 2, there's still a shot. So my prediction, and we'll talk about college football playoff predictions here a little bit later, is we might actually see a 3-loss team potentially sneak their way in. So we'll definitely see. But yeah, things are setting up for a very, very successful year down in Miami, Florida. Moving on to the next game, we've got right at 11 a.m. on the ACC network, Virginia going to Clemson. Clemson has played very good football ever since they got whooped up on by Georgia at the beginning of the year. Everybody thought Clemson was dead after that game. Well, they've come out and played some pretty good football ever since. They beat Appalachian State 66-20. They beat North Carolina State, a pretty tough North Carolina State team, 59-35. Whooped up on Stanford 40-14, beat Florida State 29-13 in a pretty tough environment in Tallahassee. And then they went to Wake Forest and whooped on Wake Forest 49-14. You look at Virginia in the last 5 games, they beat Wake Forest in September. They lose to Maryland. They beat Coastal Carolina 43-24. They beat Boston College 24-14, and then they lose to Louisville 24-20. The big question is, at 11 a.m., is this a letdown moment for Clemson? I think Clemson is playing too good a football right now. I think Clemson wins this one by 17 points. Give me Clemson 34, Virginia 17.
Man, you couldn't have said it any better because honestly, Clemson, a lot of teams and a lot of fan bases, I think, love to count them out because of the success they have had in the, not so recent future, but it hasn't been that long since they were that team. What I will say is they've played super consistent football and they've really bounced back and they really look like a team that is poised to pull off a victory against even a 4-2 pretty formidable opponent that has played pretty solid football because they're not up against a slouch. This is not going to be a blowout in the sense of a game that's going to start with Clemson just running away with it. But what I will say is what I do see happening is I think the game will stay decently close in the first half, and then I think Clemson will run away with it. And I think your prediction of about a 17-point difference in the end is perfect. I think Clemson they're not going to run away with the game, but I do think they're going to start to make that space a little bit wider in that second half, and I think we'll see a 17 to maybe even 21-point victory. But I think the game definitely will start out competitive and close, and it might remain competitive and close the entire game. I can just see Clemson really running away with it because of how they've been closing these football games as of lately.
Yeah, I agree. And that comment that came across from Pats fan 46, Clemson is a legit sleeper team for the college football playoff. Absolutely. If they win today, that puts them at 6-1, and they're undefeated in the ACC, and it sets up for them very well the remainder of the year. They play up against Louisville on the 2nd of November. Then they go to Virginia Tech, a pretty tough atmosphere in Virginia Tech. They play at number 20 Pitt, which Pitt is off to a pretty hot start right now. That'll be a pretty good game when all's said and done. Then they play against the Citadel, and then they play South Carolina. Things are setting up very well, and I can definitely see this team, running the table, potentially going undefeated the rest of the way and winning the ACC. I think they are the utmost favorite to win the ACC, but just ahead of Miami. It's going to be an interesting talking point as we go through the remainder, 6 weeks of the season. Watching the college football playoff race shake out to see where teams find themselves ultimately.
It will be because there's so much parity that could remain. I will say there's less options and opportunity for parity in a sport like football as there is basketball, since there's more games in this, and then you're playing a wider range of opponents skill wise. But there could still be parity, and there could absolutely be parity for any of these top 15, 16 teams where we could see a lot of movement. And so Clemson, Pats fan 46 is all over Clemson apparently. I'm not quite there, but I definitely think we could see them being a sleeper team. Again, sleeper team. I mean, Clemson is a historic, extremely winning team, but because of how competitive, even though it's been extended to 12 teams, that almost makes it more competitive. I know it's obviously more teams get a shot, but it makes it more competitive because more teams are getting a shot now. And the difference in records and who gets in is going to be like this for some of those teams. I mean, it is, those last few teams are going to just barely get in, honestly. Depending on how it all shakes out, it's going to be separated by such a little bit. So Clemson could be one of those teams in that bottom half. I don't think I see them being a top 8 team, but who knows? Again, who knows? They could be.
I think had the game week 1 up against Georgia not happened, this is just a hypothetical. The way they are playing football right now, they would easily be in the top 4. Without a doubt, they're within the last 5 games that they've played, they are one of the best teams in college football. They are worthy of their number 10 ranking. And you're talking about, you were just talking about, how the playing field is kind of evened with name, image, and likeness. It's allowed some of these other teams that you wouldn't expect to sneak up and be competitive. All of a sudden, they're sitting here and they're in this conversation to potentially be in the playoff at the end of the year if they take care of business. One of those teams we'll talk about next. And you're seeing more competitive games against some of these, what we would call, world beater opponents. It's crazy. All the parity going on in college football right now is nuts, and I'm all for it. College football is my favorite sport for that reason, because you just never know what's going to happen on any given Friday or Saturday. So yeah, with that being said, we're going to move on to our next game at 11 a.m. It's on Fox. It is big noon kickoff. We've got the Nebraska Cornhuskers going to Bloomington and playing number 16 Indiana. And the whole talk of the town is on Indiana for what they have done in the first 6 games. But you look at the teams that they played, and the other side of the conversation is they haven't played anybody. They've run up the score up against pretty bad teams all told. But they are still a damn good team. They are 6-0, 3-0 in conference. Kurt Cinetti has had them playing some pretty good football. You look on the other side, though. The Nebraska Cornhuskers, they're sitting at 5-1, 2-1 in conference. They're right up there. They are playing good football all told, too. The defense is doing the heavy load and carrying this team right now. According to the SP Plus rankings, Nebraska has the number 1 ranked defense in the country. So we're going to see good on good. We're going to see how Kyle Rourke reacts to Nebraska's defense, because Nebraska's defense is one of the, if not the top defense in terms of getting quarterback pressures and sacks. Plus, they forced quite a few turnovers this year. On the other side of things, Nebraska has a freshman quarterback named Dylan Raiola, who, by the way, through this point in the season, he's completed almost 67% of his passes, which is the most or the highest completion percentage that a freshman quarterback in the Big Ten has had through his first 6 collegiate games in 25 years. So you're talking since 1999 that it's been 25 years, 1999 since the Big Ten has had a freshman quarterback put up the type of completion numbers that Dylan Raiola is seeing. My whole thought process with this game, after watching, film with Indiana, film with Nebraska, I think there's going to be quite a bit, that Nebraska can take advantage of as far as Indiana's defense goes. I think there are going to be plays over the middle that Dylan Raiola can get the ball to some receivers like Ja'Cory Barney Jr. You've got Isaiah Nayer, Jamal Banks. You've got Jalen Lloyd. Get your speed across the middle. And I think there's going to be a lot of yardage across the middle of the field today. I'm going to go, this is not just a homer pick. This is going to be a pretty good game. I've got Nebraska coming out on top, 31-27 in Bloomington to move to 6-1, 3-1 in conference.
Yeah, I don't think that's a homer pick for the reason that a good point you made is they haven't really played a formidable opponent quite yet. And what I want to make, I'm going to pull a reference to the 2016 Husker season where we were on a roll and we won I think 7 games in a row. I'm not entirely sure what it was. We won quite a few games in a row, and then when we played real teams, we got smoked. It was Ohio State, and I'm trying to remember it. Either way, we didn't finish. We finished with a bowl game, lost, I believe it was Tennessee.
Yep.
But we looked legit. We were being talked about, and we looked extremely legit against those lower level teams. And then we played a team that had a formidable defense or formidable offense, and we weren't the same team. Indiana's not going to get blown out. They're not the same team as the 2016 Huskers. I'm just making the point in the fact that I definitely think they are not as good as their record boasts that they might be. I think, yes, they do have a really solid team, and they have this is the best Indiana football team we have seen in a minute. And I really think even though some of their wins have came over, a 2-4 Western Illinois and 2, 3-3 level teams in Charlotte and Northwestern, they're still a team to talk about. And they do look a lot better than they have in recent history. But also with that, I mean, our defense is one of the best in the country. Now, their offense is one of the best red zone. So you're really going best against best because their red zone offense is really solid. But that hasn't been against a defense of our caliber. So I think our defense is going to show up. I think this is going to really mirror the Rutgers game, not in score, but in how close it is and how it's going to be a defensive matchup. I do think one difference we'll see on our side is I think Raiola is going to have a better game, having that bye week, having some time to clean stuff up. Raiola is the best young quarterback and the best freshman quarterback in all of college football. But with that, he's a freshman quarterback. There's a lot of growing that has to take place, a lot of things that we're going to see still, even with his skill level, even though dude doesn't only look like Patrick Mahomes and do his pregame warm-up. He plays a little bit like him too in certain ways. The way he can throw the ball and read the field is extremely impressive, and that dude's for sure going to play on Sundays. I know he's only a freshman, but he is only going to get better. So I definitely think he's going to have a better game. I think it's going to be a slightly higher scoring game than that Huskers versus Rutgers game was, but I still think Huskers are going to come out on top. I'm going Huskers pulling it off 28-21. Again, I don't think it's going to be one of the problems we've had is closing games out, and that has been a tale as old as time. Unfortunately, I feel like all of the 2000s, especially the 2010s, closing a game out is, I don't want to say a rarity, but we struggle to close games out, and we have seen that this season in big first half performances and then kind of a fall off second half. So what I hope is that we can keep it competitive the entire game and not have a big first half. And it's really our offense. Our defense, honestly, our defense has gotten to a point where I'm not going to say our defense can win us football games, but we kind of saw that against the Rutgers. Obviously, the offense showed up when it mattered, but without those red zone stops, the Rutgers would have won 30 plus to what, we wouldn't have won the game. So the fact that we had all those red zone stops, we're battle tested, I think we're ready to go. I think we win 28-21. On the flip side, I think if Indiana does win, it will be about the same score. I don't see either team pulling a blowout off. I think this is a really even matchup, but at the same time, I do think we have the edge in a couple of positional areas and just defensively. Obviously, I mean, we're one of the best in the league.
I think ultimately in talent, Nebraska's got the talent edge. And that's just based off of recruiting. Kurt Cinetti did a good job bringing players over from James Madison, and they've got athletes. I'm not denying that. And I'm just reading this comment from Sports Maniac. Indiana's about to win 35-0. That's not going to happen unless Nebraska turns the ball over like 7 times and the defense doesn't show up. It's going to be a hell of a lot closer. Indiana is not 35 points better than Nebraska. No. So they'll turn it over 8. I don't think so.
That's crazy. They won't turn it over.
That's crazy. I'm like, have you watched Nebraska this year? Nebraska's only turned the ball over 4 times through 6 games. So,
oh my gosh.
If they turn it over 8, you might as well just burn the whole program down.
That's the season. I don't even care if we get a bowl game. I don't want to turn the ball over 8 times. I'm good on watching Husker football. We're not a turnover team like we were with. Frost is not our coach anymore. Scott Frost is not the name of our coach, by the way. So I think we're a little, not that we can blame him for everything, but I mean, pretty much every aspect of the program has turned around. So
yeah,
something to think about.
Well, and like I said earlier, Indiana hasn't exactly faced a defense like Nebraska this year. The whole question and answer that we're looking for this game, what is Indiana going to do once they get punched in the mouth a little bit? And I think our defense is going to get, they're going to get pressure on Rourke. What's Rourke going to do under pressure? Especially if Nebraska can contain him, because Rourke can run. He has shown the ability to run the football when he needs to. But if Nebraska can contain him, make Indiana one-dimensional, because, oh, by the way, Nebraska has a top 5 rushing defense in the country. If Indiana can't run the ball and Indiana is forced to throw the ball all over the yard, I think the matchup, further, goes into Nebraska's favor, because I think they can sit back and I think they can have a heyday on Rourke. It's going to be an interesting chess match. It's literally good on good. And who would have thought this Nebraska-Indiana game would have some pretty big stakes in the Big Ten. You've got, Nebraska sitting at 5-1, 2-1 in conference. You've got Indiana 6-0, 3-0 in conference. So you're literally talking about the winner here either taking solid possession of second place in the Big Ten, or like Nebraska, if they pull out the win, they're going to be, second or third in the Big Ten. So it's kind of crazy. You're talking about a divisionless conference now. If you're in the top 2, you're going to the conference championship. So again, it's going to be an interesting game. All told to pay attention to at 11 a.m. big noon kickoff. We'll talk more about Nebraska in our Nebraska Husker segment. We're going to move on to our 2:30 slate now. We've got a very big game on ABC. Number 7 Alabama against number 11 Tennessee. Huge game in Knoxville. Alabama hasn't exactly looked great, all told. They lost 40-35 to Vanderbilt 2 weeks ago. Vanderbilt's biggest win in school history, because it was against the number 1 team in the country at the time. And then they barely skate by South Carolina. You look at, Tennessee, they've also kind of scuttled a little bit. After starting off the season extremely hot, they beat North Carolina State 51-10. They beat Kent State 71 to nothing. They beat Oklahoma 25-15 in Norman, by the way, very tough environment. They go to Arkansas and they lose 19-14, another pretty tough environment, and then they play Florida and barely get by 23-17. So you got two teams that are kind of scuttling right now, trying to find their way. What are your thoughts on this matchup between number 7 Alabama and number 11 Tennessee?
Well, it always provides a all-star, high caliber, several NFL future players that you'll see on Sunday level type game where we see so much star power, so much talent. What I will say is this: both teams have struggled, like you alluded to. I mean, both teams have not had those top tier championship caliber level seasons that we've seen, and specifically Alabama. Tennessee has always been a team that has stayed pretty respectable, but they definitely have not been a championship caliber team year in and year out like Alabama has been. But Alabama, I mean, it's been a disappointing season, but I also think it's a growing pain season. And obviously with Saban retiring, obviously they named the field after him and he's still pretty much at every game, but he's not on the field. It's not the same. And I think the team is obviously not the same either. I think arguably they have more talent on their team this season than they did in his last year. And I think that they'll continue to cultivate that talent and become the annoying Alabama team that at least I hate. I don't know about you, bro, but I hate. They're just one of those teams that it's annoying to watch them just be that good. But they are not that team this year. They're not that level of a team, but I think that they will get there with the players that they have because they have a decently young team in a lot of areas, a lot of positions. And with that, they've got a lot of talent in those positions, even so. I don't see this being a blowout for either team. I think this is going to be a classic shot for shot punch game. And I think it's going to be a 35 to 50 point game. I think we're going to see a high scoring game where the defenses will show up. That's what's going to make the difference for whatever team ends up winning. The defense that shows up and can stop that high caliber offense is going to be the one that wins ultimately. I think it's Alabama. I think Alabama pulls the victory off. I think the final score is somewhere between 35 to 50 points, and I think it could very well end up being an OT battle as well. I think we will see it. It could be as close as one score, or it could be farther and closer to that 2 to 3 scores. But I definitely think we're going to see a 1 to 2 score Alabama victory in the end, whether that's overtime or during when that regular time and that clock runs out. But give me Alabama. I think that they will pull it off. But two struggling teams, two teams that need this win. It's going to be interesting to see, and it's at home for Tennessee. That stadium does make a difference.
Yeah, Knoxville is going to be rocking, no doubt, at 2:30. And with that, I'm going to give Tennessee the edge. I think Tennessee is going to win a very high-scoring game. I think it's going to be like a 45 to 38 type game. I think Tennessee makes just one more big play than Alabama does. And I think it's just going to be a classic Alabama-Tennessee game of the last few years where they've all been pretty high scoring. So yeah, give me Tennessee 45 to 38. Very entertaining. Alabama goes into this game as a 3-point favorite. Over under total is 57.5. The game is easily going to go over. I think if you're going to go out and bet this game, it's going to go over the total pretty easily. And I think the spread, Tennessee +3 would be a pretty good bet as well. Moving on to the next game.
Before we move on to the next game, I want to ask you, because these teams are decently not they're what are they, four rankings off of each other?
Yeah.
My question to you before we move on and talk about that next game is, which team do you think finishes either in that top 12 or just higher up? Which team do you think of these two teams will have that better finish for the season?
I think if Tennessee comes out on top, I think the answer to the question is easily Tennessee. Um, you look at, the remaining schedule, and it's all in told pretty favorable. If they beat Alabama, they play Kentucky, they play Mississippi State, at Georgia, which nobody knows what to think of Georgia right now. Georgia is so up and down, even though they've won. They're 5-1, but they haven't looked particularly great. And then they play UTEP and then at Vanderbilt. So I think if Tennessee pulls it off, there's a path there where they're 10-2 to 11-1, depending on that game in Sanford Stadium against Georgia. Who do you have finishing above one another in the final ranking of the year?
Well, so as surprised as it might be, even though I picked Alabama to win, I actually have Tennessee still finishing higher up because looking at Alabama's remaining schedule, I see them losing to Missouri. I see them losing to LSU. Obviously, could they win one of those games? Of course they could. Between the two, I have them winning Missouri over LSU. But because this Alabama team is a little bit, I don't want to say inexperienced, but they definitely have that vibe to them. They definitely have, like I said, they've got some growing pains. They have the talent, but when one of your best players is, I believe he's still 17, that obviously shows that you have probably some growing pains and some things that might take some time to cultivate and grow. And we saw them pick up that loss against Vandy. And I'm sorry, Vanderbilt, shout out to Vanderbilt. Unfortunately, this win came a few years after they called them out in that video. I don't know if you remember them calling them out. But if only it would have matched up, bro. He was just a few years too soon. It's okay, though. I'm sure he's somewhere smiling now because right when they pulled that win off, I thought of that video of him calling Alabama out. I was like, hey, it wasn't on time. It happened.
I think that was after Vanderbilt went to like 5-0 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of crazy. They
Go.
got off to a pretty hot start, and then they get beat 59-0, and they end up finishing 5-7 that year. So, yeah.
Hey, I know Indiana has a slightly better record, but what if that's the same thing that happens? What if we go in, boom, 50+0,
Well,
and then I don't think that's gonna. Hey.
Okay, if that happens, you might as well throw Nebraska in the ring to probably be in the Big Ten championship. But
my gosh, yeah. No, if they even had a 20-point win over Indiana, I would say we would.
I think, I know we were just talking about Alabama, Tennessee, but I'm kind of going back to the Nebraska-Indiana game. If Nebraska's defense comes out and holds that offense of Indiana down, and Nebraska, finds a way and puts up, three or four touchdowns, it could be a game where it's the first team to 28 wins. By far. It could be. I think the defense is going to come out with a similar game plan to Colorado. That Colorado game. Because Colorado wanted to run the ball. Nebraska stopped Colorado's run game and forced Colorado to try and beat them, through the air. And Nebraska just sat back and they made plays. So, yeah, that game's going to be interesting. If Nebraska comes out and wins by multiple scores, all the conversation will be back on Nebraska next week. For sure.
We'll be pretty hyped next episode. That's all we're gonna say. If we pull it off, we'll be talking pretty crazy, I think. If we get a multi-score win.
Next week will become huge because you're talking potentially a top 15 matchup in Columbus next week on Big Noon Kick. So
some exciting stuff coming up for sure for our boys.
Yep, yes, sir. All right, let's move on to the next game in our 2:30 window. We've got number 24 Michigan up against number 22 Illinois. Number 22 Illinois. The whole thing. Last year they weren't very good. They were beat up. They turned the ball over a lot. Now they've got a quarterback in Altmaier who hasn't turned the ball over. It's been a complete 180. Luke Altmaier has, 1,400 passing yards. He's 111 for 164, 14 touchdowns to only one interception. And then you've got Michigan, who really can't throw the ball. They are focused on running the ball all the time, which is not necessarily a recipe for success, but they found some semblance of success to get a couple of wins. what are your thoughts on this Illinois Michigan matchup? It's a pretty interesting chess match. Who do you think has the edge?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I think this is a super even matchup. And who would have thought we would have been calling defending champs Michigan versus Illinois an even matchup? I would have not thought that last year because, like you said, they were not this team last year. I will say, under their current head coach, who they picked up in 2021, they've been quietly building up a little bit of consistency, but it's not been like this. They've looked like a really, really good team. Obviously, they picked up a win over the Huskers. Part of that was the Huskers not having their greatest game in certain areas, and definitely second half play. That was a big example of second half play and some issues with closing out games. But I think people discredited the win because they're like, oh, the Huskers are back to losing again, blah, blah. No, I think Illinois has that edge over teams that we saw when they beat us. Now, I think we could have absolutely done things differently and won and had a way better game.
Yeah.
But I think Illinois is that team that can expose those things in game and have a really solid game. And I think they pull off the win. Now, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be separated between 3 and 7 points. I think Illinois wins 27-20, or excuse me, 21-20, but I think it could also be 21-24, and we could see Illinois win off of a field goal. So I think it'll be 21-28 or 21-24. But I'm taking Illinois because I think that they have that edge. And then on the flip side, Michigan just is not the team that they were when they won that championship.
No.
They're not the same team. They've proven that they're not the same team with several losses. Obviously, they didn't have the most favorable schedule with certain games and certain teams they played, but they've proven that they can't keep that level and keep that type of spot that a defending champion would have. So they're definitely not. I think Michigan loses this game, and then I don't know if we see Michigan be ranked again this season. I think that Michigan loses and maybe lose their ranking for the season. Obviously, could they get it back? Obviously, could they win? Sure, but I give me Illinois, and give me Illinois by 3 to 7 points, winning 21-28 or 21-24.
I can definitely see that. I'm going to give Illinois the edge as well. Illinois has done way more, passing the ball. They're a little bit more balanced than Michigan. Michigan is literally the definition of one-dimensional. They only run the ball on, any given week they're only running the ball, which is not a recipe for success, especially if that team you're playing up against will, they'll obviously play the run a lot more. You're talking, Warren for Michigan. He leads the team in passing yards, and he only has 444 passing yards, 48 of 72, 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And then you look at Luke Altmaier, 111 for 164, 1,426 passing yards, 14 touchdowns to 1 pick. And then you look at running, Mullings, pretty good running back for Michigan, 91 carries, 589 yards, 6 touchdowns. And then Fegan, 67 carries, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns for Illinois. So it's a little bit more, if you look at, for an offensive philosophy, the edge obviously goes to Illinois because they can do a little bit of both. Michigan, I think, has the better talent, all told. It's just their quarterback is the big question mark. So this could be a game that I could see Illinois pulling off at home. This could also be a game that I could see Michigan utilize their talent in the best way possible and, pull off a couple of score win. But I'm going to give the edge to Illinois just for the fact that they are a known commodity right now. Give me Illinois 27-24.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they're definitely a team that Michigan, they're not that team they were when they won the championship, but I definitely would give them that talent edge, especially in a few areas. But Illinois, just as an entire team, I think looks more consistent, and they have proven that they can beat a team with a top-level defense such as the Huskers. So I feel like because they've proven now, again, we had not our greatest game in a lot of areas, but I think Illinois, like I said before, is a team that will expose that and will use that to their advantage, because not every team, if you're having an off day, not every team will be able to take advantage of that and pull off that win and have that edge. So shout out to Illinois. I think I think honestly that Illinois has a chance of winning the next 4 out of their 5 games. I don't think they're going to post Michigan. I don't think they beat Oregon. Oregon's the one I think they lose. Now, also though, they could be a team that beats Oregon possibly. I don't see that happening. And I think that is that next week. I believe that's next week or the
I think
following.
that's
We can
let
also pull
me
that up, honestly. We might as well just see where we're at. But I know that they play them either next week or the week after, and I think that that is their loss they pick up. But give me Illinois winning 4 out of their 5
yeah,
final
it's
games.
next week.
That, man, that's going to be a game. And if Illinois can, if and when, because I really think they will beat Michigan, I think it'll be close. And I like your 24-27. I think it'll be separated by 3 to 7 points no matter who wins. Could it be a blowout? Could one team take advantage late? Sure. But I think it'll be separated by 3 to 7. But give me Illinois possibly winning out minus that Oregon game. I think post Oregon game they win their final four because I do think that they are a team that's capable of that, honestly.
They're very capable. Um, I'm kind of moving on to a different game that we didn't originally have in our list to talk about, and I'm gonna give our service academies a little bit of love. We've got number 23 Army 6-0, 5-0 in the American Conference going up against East Carolina. Army has come out like a bat out of hell, and they're playing some damn good football. Their defense is solid, and their rush offense is toward the top. Right now, Army is a 17-point favorite. You think Army stays undefeated today?
I do. I do. I don't think they finished their season undefeated, but I think and shout out to Army. And anyone watching throughout this show, if there's any games we don't talk about or players we don't talk about, segments, shout us out in the comments. Tell us what you want to hear us talk about. We'll always do that. But shout out to them because I do think that they will remain undefeated. I don't think they'll have an undefeated season, but I think they'll win. I have them winning by 20 to 28 points. I'm not gonna lie. I think they're not a. I could it be a different score? Could they show up? Yes, but I think they win by 21 to 28 points.
I think the way it's two different teams. Army has come out and taken care of business, and they've blown out damn near everybody that they've played. I mean, you look at their last five. They whooped up on Florida Atlantic 24-7. They beat Rice 37-14. They beat Temple at Temple 42-14. They went to Tulsa, beat Tulsa 49-7. Then they played up against University of Alabama Birmingham and beat them 44-10. They are taking care of teams, and they're looking good. I've got Army winning this one 45-7. I don't think it's going to be very close. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see what Army looks like the remainder of the year. They've got East Carolina, then they play Air Force on the 2nd of November. They play at North Texas, then they play versus Notre Dame, which I think could be a damn good game. You've got UTSA, and then you've got number 25 Navy, which let's talk about Navy a little bit, shall we? While we're on the Army hype train, Navy has looked really good, and they are playing up against Charlotte at 2:30 on the CBS Sports Network. They are currently a 16-point favorite, and they're another team that's really been taking care of teams this year. What are your thoughts on the Navy midshipmen?
I mean, they like you said, they've been taking care of teams for sure. It's been interesting to see these service teams showing up because they haven't always done that. We've seen great teams for Army, for Navy, but we've also seen some absolutely terrible. Did you just see that comment about? Yeah, I was wondering
Yeah,
when
I
you.
saw that comment. That's
I was
crazy.
wondering when you would see
Crazy
that
talk.
one roll in, and it
Crazy talk.
Husker hate. Where are Husker fans at, man? When we get this Husker segment going, we better see some Husker love in the comment section, not Husker hate. But no, Navy midshipmen, shout out 5-0, 25. Charlotte, they're gonna. I mean, that's gonna be a steamroll. One thing I will say that is gonna be super exciting to touch on is their next matchup against Notre Dame. We're gonna talk about Notre Dame in a little bit, but their next game is against currently ranked number 12 Notre Dame, and so watch. this is my scenario. They go against Charlotte. I think they win. Give me 42-3 or 42-7 or 42-10. I'm going to cap Charlotte at 10. I don't think they score 10, but I'm going to give them some love. Shout out to Charlotte. They've had a little bit of a rough season. So I'm going to give them some love and say they might score 10 points. Probably going to score 3. Navy goes against Notre Dame, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit. Spoiler alert, I don't think they're going to lose their ranking. I do think Notre Dame will still be ranked when they play Navy, but also Navy will still be ranked as well. So I think we'll see a very high caliber matchup next Saturday, Notre Dame versus Navy. But I think they blow Charlotte out of the water.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Navy over Charlotte 42-10. Again, there is a scenario, if we're going through the remaining schedule, there's a scenario for Navy and Army to potentially be undefeated going up against their big rivalry game on December 14th. And that's kind of crazy to think about because that game could really solidify you being in the college football playoff. We could be talking about a service academy in the college football playoff, which I am all for, man.
Oh, me too, bro. That'd be crazy.
It'd be absolutely nuts, and I would root for them to win it all, especially if Nebraska doesn't make it in. But yeah, it's both teams are doing really good things as far as running the ball, and they've even shown a little life in throwing the ball too, which you don't see in the service academy too much. So yeah, it'll be pretty interesting. I've got Navy winning against Charlotte 42-10 as well. I kind of want to check out this other game as well while we're at it at 6:30 o'clock tonight. At 6:30 tonight on FS1, we've got UCF going to Ames, playing up against the number 9 Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State's playing some very good football right now. Currently, they're sitting at a 13-point favorite. What are your thoughts on Iowa State? Do you think they keep it going and they stay undefeated?
I think Iowa State might be a surprise team that we see in the top 8 by the end of the season, possibly. And I say that because if they can pull off, which UCF might not be one of their hardest matchups that they have for their remaining schedule, but if they can pull off that win after it wasn't like it was the closest victory ever, but they definitely had a little bit of a closer game in their last matchup. And so if they can pull off a commendable and 2-3 score win against UCF, I see them beating Texas Tech. I see them beating Kansas. See them beating Cincinnati. I see them beating Utah. And then I see there being a very high stakes matchup against Kansas State, that last regular game of the season. I've been throwing around too many undefeated or these teams are going to win out this episode, I feel like, but I'm going to throw another one out. I think Iowa State really could be a team that finishes the season undefeated and possibly finishes in that top 8 spot. UCF is not that good of a team. They're 3-3. We've seen them pick up losses against the likes of Colorado, and I'm not hating on Colorado because they do have talent and they are a better team this year than they were last year, but the UCF is not that team, and Iowa State on the flip side is that team. Could there be an upset? I can maybe see this game in some reality somewhere being an upset, but that is I see that being this a 2% chance. I really think Iowa State wins. I don't think it's as convincing as those last few games we talked about. I think they're going to win. Give me Iowa State winning 35-14 over UCF. I think it's going to be a game. I think UCF hands up a couple of scores. I think UCF shows up because they do have talent, but I think Iowa State wins and wins pretty convincingly and continues their possible undefeated bid.
Yeah, I think Iowa State also takes care of business. I think Jack Trice is going to be rocking tonight. Iowa State's defense is legit. Their offense is also pretty legit. Their running game is pretty damn good, and their passing game is as well. Give me Iowa State 35-13 tonight in Jack Trice. I think the atmosphere is going to be too much for UCF. all told. Moving on to another game in the 6:30 window. Huge game. Absolutely huge game. Number 5 Georgia versus number 1 Texas. This game arguably has the most SEC stakes at hand. Big question is Texas a legit number 1 team, or has Georgia just kind of sleptwalk? And are they the real legit team to win the SEC? What are your thoughts on this matchup between number 5 Georgia and number 1 Texas? I think you're muted.
I sure am. I think this is going to be one of the higher scoring matchups of the weekend. I think it's going to be around the same level of a punch for punch game as that Alabama versus Tennessee game is going to be. I do see there being a bit of separation towards the end going in Texas's favor. I think Texas is, if there's one team that I don't want to say I'm confident is going to go undefeated this season, but if there's one team that is playing like that undefeated, when you think of the word undefeated in a football team, I think you think of Texas. I think you think of, because top to bottom, I do truly think Texas has what it takes to go undefeated and to finish number 1 and to stay where they're at. Georgia obviously is number 5, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that they're going to keep that spot. Obviously, if they lose to Texas, they're not going to keep that spot. Do I see Georgia making the playoffs and remaining in the top 12? I think it's a possibility, but I don't think it's a shoo-in. I think Texas, on the other hand, is going to stay in that spot. They're going to stay number 1. I've got Texas, and again, I think it's going to be a game that is shot for shot, touchdown for touchdown from the start. But I think once we enter that fourth quarter, I think Texas is going to show who they are, and I think Texas is going to win by upwards of 7 to 10 points, and I think it's going to be a score. I think it's going to be give me Texas winning 42 to 35, or 45 to 35. I think they're going to have a little bit of separation in the end and pull it off with either a score, and then maybe they hit a late field goal or a field goal and then a late score. So give me Texas pulling it off. Again, Georgia, even if they pick up a loss against Texas, could have some life. But I think if they pick up this loss to Texas, I think that's their season. Now, again, that's their season. They still could win, 9+ games, but I think that's their season in the sense of playoff/championship hope. So give me Texas winning by 7 to 10 points and give me Texas keeping it up. I just called myself out last time. I'm like, all these undefeated teams I'm picking. Well, I'm picking another one, but I think again, this one is my most confident undefeated pick because I think they've played the most like a team that will remain undefeated consistently. They've played higher caliber matchups. They've played lower caliber matchups and haven't sleptwalked. They have been that team the entire season. They're more
they're battle tested.
They're battle tested. Georgia is also battle tested, but it's not in the same ways it's not in the best ways. They're a little beat up as opposed to battle tested. So give me Texas winning by 7 to 10 points.
Yeah. If you were to, ask me who, even without looking at the rankings, like who the legit number 1 team is at this point in the season, my answer would be the Texas Longhorns. Their defense is legit. Their offense is legit. Even without Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning has come in and he's been torching defenses. Through a couple of games, 2-3 games, he's already got like 900 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So absolutely crazy. And you look at their last 5 games, they played Michigan, which everybody going into that game was like, oh man, this could be one of the biggest games of the year. And at the time it was. Texas goes in and wins by 19 points, 31-12. Then they play UTSA, did what they needed to do, beat them 56-7. They go into the next week, play Louisiana Monroe, beat them 51-3. did what they had to do. They play Mississippi State at home, take care of business, did what they needed to do, win 35-13, and then they go and did what they did to Oklahoma, beating them 34-3. Oklahoma wasn't even in the game, it seemed. Texas is legit, and I tell you what, I've got the Texas Longhorns winning by 11 points. Give me the Texas Longhorns 28-17. I think they've got a little bit more firepower than Georgia, and I just think Texas has been a little bit more consistent.
Agreed. And consistency is key in this league. Consistency is everything. No matter what conference, no matter if you can remain consistent, that's what matters most, because the teams that are up and down, even if you get that last playoff spot or a playoff spot, what you need to have come postseason is consistency, because you don't have 10 plus games to get it right. You have one chance, one game to move on or be out. And so I think it's super important that Texas proves that they are that consistent, and I think they will. Give me Texas winning. I like your call. I think Texas wins it. I think this is Texas's year to, I'm not going to say this is their year to win the championship, but this is their year to be that team that they have not been for a while, because they've been really mediocre and really just not super successful. We've seen all these teams that are kind of having a resurgence as a whole, and that's one team. As much as, I mean, you can see what teams we're repping. We don't like Texas, but I got to give them respect, and as long as we're not the ones playing them, I don't mind watching them. They're kind of a fun – they are a decent –
They are a fun team.
They're fun. Exactly. They're a fun team to watch. So shout out to Texas. Time will tell what happens there. One of our last games we're talking about is Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is currently unranked. As Notre Dame 12th or 13th? Where are they
I think they're 12th.
12th. So Notre Dame is currently in that top 12, right, sitting on the edge. Obviously, Notre Dame had a really disappointing loss early in the season, and since then they did, to their credit, they bounced back. Not every team bounces back. We have seen teams drop unexpected losses early, and then that has canned and crushed their season. Notre Dame has not appeared to have had that happen to them. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, we were talking about Florida State. We're going to talk about them again. Florida State, one of the worst teams, one of the most disappointing teams, and picked up an unexpected loss to Georgia Tech. But Georgia Tech has been bitten with the injury bug extremely hard, and they are missing quite a few key players. But even without that, without thinking about the injuries, this and that, do you think Georgia Tech pulls off a second upset this year? And is it going to be against Notre Dame? Is Notre Dame the team to fall 2 times in 1 year? Are they not that legit? I always think whenever Notre Dame is ranked, I always laugh a little bit, because they're never that legit. I'm not going to lie. This is not a Notre Dame hate channel or hate show, but I truly think that Notre Dame always shows that they are not legit at some point in the season, and I think they showed it early in that upset loss. I'll leave it at that. What do you think?
I think Georgia Tech can very well beat Notre Dame today. I think the atmosphere in Georgia Tech Stadium is going to be rocking, and I don't trust Notre Dame right now. I really don't. Even though they are the number 12 team in the country, I don't really trust them. 5-1. You look at, some of their, recent, games. They took care of business against Stanford. Stanford isn't very good. They played a very close game against Louisville. But then you look at a game like Northern Illinois and they lose 16-14. And Northern Illinois just played possession ball the whole time. Well, guess what? Georgia Tech plays possession ball. They are towards the top in the country in time of possession in their games. So you look at that portion of it. I think Georgia Tech slops this game up. It's going to be a sloppy game. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game, with that being told. I have Georgia Tech winning 21-17. I think they have what it takes to pull off the upset, even with their question mark at quarterback, because they still don't know what's going to go on in that position. But I do think they make one more play.
Well, we have the exact same score, but the exact opposite outcome. I have Notre Dame slugging along, pulling off a win. And listen, Notre Dame, they're not that team, and they're usually not that team. They haven't been that team for a little while. Obviously, they had some 2010s success, and they've still been a team that's been ranked and have had some decent wins. But I just don't feel like they're a team that is going to be able to make a playoff push or even make the playoffs. I do think they beat Georgia Tech. Now, if Georgia Tech, and last I checked, that their star quarterback, he is officially out complete for sure.
Yeah.
Now their backup is not a slouch, and their backup, I believe, is has not more experience on the team, but is an older player. Is so I having an older quarterback come in. I mean, we saw it. Let's talk about Ron Kellogg. He would
Yeah.
come in and he would fill in and have games, and he would show up and show out. And he wasn't that guy. He wasn't that young, talented quarterback. He was that older, that quarterback that knew how to get it done. So I definitely think Georgia Tech has a quarterback that has that same stature. They could come out, lead the team. And like you said, Notre Dame, I mean, they are known to lose those possession ball games, and we saw that with that early season loss. And that killed it. But was that week 2 or week 3? It was early.
It was very early. That was September 7th. So that was, I think, week 2.
Because they had a big week 1 win, if I remember. Maybe not. I thought they had a ranked, was it Texas A&M? I could be wrong.
Yeah, they played at Texas A&M on August 31st and won 23-13, and everybody thought Notre Dame was going to be a viable contender. And then they have that letdown against Northern Illinois the week after.
And I feel like that's what always happens. I feel like they're a team that is like they have that hype, and then that train just disconnects. So I think that they'll pull it off. I don't have Notre Dame winning out or having like an insane playoff run or even playoff season, but I do have them beating Georgia Tech. But I'm all for another upset. And Georgia Tech is a fun team to watch. I do actually enjoy watching. When I watched that week 1 matchup when they had that win against Florida State, and they're a fun team to watch. And I think they could be a team that we are talking about as being maybe a top 15 team next season, or just I see them being a formidable team in the coming future. I don't see that being this year, obviously, but I do think they will be in that top 15, break into that top 15 in the coming years for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that think that pretty much covers it, for some of the games in the slate that we're going to cover for today. Obviously, if you guys in the chat want us to talk about a game in today's slate, comment and we'll go over it. Until then, we will move over to our Husker football segment. The big question is, they're 5-1. Nebraska is 5-1. They've looked a lot better. There's a lot of talk, going on with how they've, finished games. And I agree and then I disagree with it. Because I agree with getting a lead. It's kind of like the NFL mentality. You get a lead and you literally just melt the clock away. Which is what they've done in large part in the season. Last week against Rutgers, 2 weeks ago against Rutgers, it was tough to do anything because Rutgers had one of the top rushing defenses in the country going in. So running the ball was pretty difficult to do. And then passing the ball in 50-mile-an-hour winds was very difficult too. The wind was literally swirling in that stadium a couple of weeks ago. So I think, with the defense as good as it is, the offense just needs to do, maybe a little bit more. But they've all in all taken care of business up to this point. I mean, there's really been no doubt in a lot of these games, minus the Illinois game. And they play a very tough opponent, this week against Indiana. Indiana's going to throw their, wrenches at Nebraska, and Nebraska's got to try and catch them. So, I think they have been pretty solid. What's your overview so far in the Nebraska football season so far?
It's been solid. It hasn't been without its growing pains, but I think I will take growing pains over just dropping games. I'll
Yep.
do it. I will absolutely take growing pains over just dropping games. And we have just been dropping games. Even last season under Rule's leadership, it was better, but we still were dropping games. We are not that team this season. The turnaround and the difference from last season to this season is extremely drastic. And I have never been one. I mean, when I was younger, when I was like started going to games, remembering games when I was like 5, 6. We were obviously, we had Sue around that time. We had David, we had Levante David, we had Martinez, and then beyond that we had Kenny Bell. We had some teams that had marquee players, but we have not had a team this good top to bottom that I can remember watching since I've been actually watching football games. I truly believe that. Again, we don't have an Amir Abdullah. We don't have a Kenny Bell, but we have players that could develop to that skill set. And even if not, we just have an immense amount of talent that we have not had. And even if we have had the talent under like a Frost, we weren't cultivating it. We weren't working it correctly.
Yep.
Rule is a team builder. That is what he has done. The NFL is not a team building place. That is not a place where that mentality works.
Everybody's playing for their paycheck.
Exactly. So when he went to the NFL and it didn't work, that wasn't so much him as his style and what he does is very much college based. I truly believe that. I think the team building and what he is doing for those dudes outside of it with lessons and with it, and he was built to be a college coach, not an NFL coach. I really think, and so Rule being the guy that they took a chance on and coming in and turning us around. I mean, we are one win. We are going to a bowl game this year. I don't care if we drop 3, 4, 5. We are going. We will pull off one more victory. I mean, UCLA is a trash can of a team. If we can only beat them, we're beating UCLA. I'm sorry.
Now,
They're what, 1-5? I mean, they're terrible.
yeah, they're pretty bad. But if we're saying that Nebraska's only going to win one more game the remainder of the year, that would be a major disappointment after the start that they've
It
had.
would be a major disappointment because then that would just put us right at 6 wins. But I don't foresee that happening. But the fact that we're at 5 where we're at is a great sign because we have been at 3, at 2. We have been in different places when we've been at this point of the season.
You look at the last 3 years. Just for instance, Nebraska has been 3-3 going into week 7. So they're 5-1. This is their best start that they've had since 2016, since they started the season 7-0 that year. You just look at this team top to bottom. They are more disciplined. They are not turning the ball over, which was the story of last year. Nebraska was literally at the bottom of the barrel, when you talk about teams that turn the ball over. They were, I think, 130th out of 132 teams as far as turnovers go. It was bad. And now you've got a quarterback that takes care of the ball. He's only thrown 3 interceptions, and Nebraska's only fumbled the ball once this year. And 2 of those interceptions weren't even Dylan Raiola's fault. They both could have very well been big plays or touchdowns. Just really good plays that were made by the defensive backs. So, Nebraska is a more disciplined team that they have been probably in the last decade. And that says a lot. And that's a reason why they're 5-1. There's a reason why they are competitive in these games. There's a reason why they're taking care of these teams in these games. Like even, the game up against, Illinois. Extremely competitive game. Extremely competitive. Very close. Unfortunately, it didn't go our way, but we can't control that. You go up against Purdue the next week at 11 a.m., and it was a scoreless first half. That is a game, if we were talking about a Frost team from a couple of years ago, that is a game Nebraska loses. And yet Nebraska still pulled away and won by 18 points and scored 28 points in the second half. You play against Rutgers, which it was 97 degrees, at one point during the game with 50-mile-an-hour winds, swirling through the stadium. You only score 14 points. That is a game a few years ago Nebraska loses. They are finding a way to win these games. They're finding a way to make one more play than the other team. A testament to that Rutgers game. That goal line stand that they had. Rutgers gets the punt block, and they're on the 2-yard line. In 6 plays, Nebraska gets the ball back. And, oh, by the way, Rutgers has one of the best running backs in the country in Monangai. Yet they couldn't punch the ball into the end zone. Nebraska has not given up a rushing touchdown all year long. They are the only power conference team to say that. It's a testament to, how far this team has come. Nebraska is a damn good team. All the comments saying Indiana is going to win 35-0, that's a bunch of bull honky. I don't care if it's a joke or not. Nebraska is a way better team than people give them credit for. And there's a lot of people giving Nebraska credit. Nebraska has had a lot of national names talking about them. Because, oh, by the way, they've got the flashy new toy at quarterback. They've got, through his first 6 games, like I alluded to earlier, he has the highest completion percentage of a freshman quarterback in the Big Ten in 25 years. 25 years.
That's crazy.
So, to go and say Nebraska is the same old Nebraska, they are not the same old Nebraska.
Definitely.
This is a Nebraska team that will beat the ever-living piss out of you on defense and do just enough on offense. And that's what you need to do to win football games. You need to just do just enough. As long as you have one more point, than the opponent and win, that's it. That's the mentality. This is a gritty, tough team. I hate to say it, but this is kind of like the Iowa approach. The Iowa approach for the last few years. Gritty and tough on defense. The special teams part of it, we won't even talk about that. Brian Buschini has done very well punting the ball. He's averaged over 48 yards a punt. So that side of it's okay. Gritty on defense, okay on offense. Serviceable at times on special teams. It's a recipe for success. You look at the remainder of their schedule. They play Indiana, which I got them playing a very tight game against Indiana, and I have them winning against Indiana. If Nebraska wins against Indiana next week, and we'll talk about more of it next week, next week's game against Ohio State is huge. It is a very huge game, and it's on Big Noon Kickoff again. You're talking back-to-back weeks on Fox's biggest stage, which is kind of crazy. It's been a while since Nebraska has been on that, pedestal. But yeah, they win today. They have a chance to play a competitive game against Ohio State. Ohio State, all in total, I don't think they're a complete team. And they showed that last week against Oregon. Oregon's the more complete team. Ohio State has things that I think if Nebraska goes into that game playing very well, Nebraska could exploit Ohio State a little bit. I'm not saying they can beat Ohio State. I'm saying it could be a more competitive game with Ohio State than it has been in the last 5 years. You've got UCLA, who we just talked about. They're absolutely dog water.
Awful.
They're so bad. But hey, like their coach said in Big Ten Media Day, they're in LA. And then they go to USC. USC is not very good either.
They're 3-3, yeah.
They're 3-3. They're not good. They play Wisconsin at home, and then they go to Iowa. You're talking about a pretty decent end of the schedule that they can actually make quite a bit of noise in.
Oh yeah,
Like
easily
like
3 to 4 wins post Indiana.
yeah, I think if they could beat Indiana, they could possibly get at least 4 more. You're talking a 10-2 record, maybe 9-3. Maybe I won't give them that USC game right now. But I think the schedule is there to where they could finish 9-3 to 10-2. I really do think they can finish that high. They can even, if they heaven forbid pulled off Ohio State, they can win out the rest of the year. Like they have, Nebraska is a good team. They're a legit good team, and I think they are a championship, Big Ten championship contender. I think they'll finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten this year. It's what I predicted them going into this season. I think a lot of it has to do with the quarterback that we have behind center now. Having a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over, it's kind of crazy what it does for a team.
That is true. Shocking what that can do.
Exactly. It really flips the whole conversation on its head.
It does. That is true.
It's like you talk about, the last few years, how close Nebraska was. They turn the ball over 4 times a game, but they lose by 3 points. You don't turn the ball over in those games. You're talking a totally different Nebraska team. You're talking about a team that's winning, 8, 9, 10 games every year. If those games didn't have all those turnovers. So, that's enough of me talking for a little bit. What are your thoughts, thus far going through the Nebraska season?
Well, I'm definitely with you on. I do really think that the Huskers will keep that Ohio State game competitive. I don't think it will go beyond that. I'm not super convinced we'll win, but we've seen Ohio State games where we've lost by like 30 to 40 points. It's not going to be that game. I'd say it's going to be separated no matter who wins. I think it'll be separated by 10 to 14 points. That is my prediction. Now, if the Huskers somehow pull off a victory, it might be a little bit closer, but I think whoever wins by 10 to 14 points. I'm going to give that to Ohio State, but I think beyond that, there is no reason we couldn't win the rest of our games. I think I'm giving us a floor of 7 wins and a ceiling of 10. Now, my floor of 7 wins is I really, really, really do not think we're only going to win 7 games. But that gets us a bowl game. That's obviously an improvement. It wouldn't feel the same because of how we started the season. It's not going to feel the same if we only win 7 games because of how we started, because we're 5-1 right now. It's not going to feel the same if we only win 7 games, but it still is an improvement. But I am with you on it being closer to that 9 or 10 win season. I think we could win 10. I really do. I think if we lose another game, I don't want to say it would be that Iowa game, but if I'm giving us a loss, which it pains me to say that, if I'm giving us a loss outside of Ohio State, I think it's that Iowa game. We're not losing to UCLA. I don't think we're losing to USC. I really don't. USC is not, they've proven that they're not that team. Could they regain that USC caliber and be a Big Ten contender? Of course. That's not them this season. And then Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I believe, boasts the same record as Iowa currently. I could be wrong. I think they've got that same record. Maybe I'm one game off, but I think we take Wisconsin. So the only game that I could see us possibly dropping outside of Ohio State is that Iowa game, but I think we beat Iowa. I think the only game that I'm sitting here today and saying I think we pick up a possible L is that Ohio State game. But again, you never know. And if we pick up a win, and let's say we were talking about this earlier, and it was really more in passing as a joke talking about if they won by so many points. But let's say the Huskers pull off a big win today. I really do think you're looking at a team that could absolutely possibly win out and beat Ohio State or make it super competitive. We've got an Indiana fan possibly in our chat saying that Indiana is going to beat Nebraska today.
We'll see.
We've gotten a couple of that. We haven't had any Husker love so far. I'm hoping that changes at some point, but it's okay. We'll take it. When we end up winning, it's okay. We'll have a lot to talk about next weekend.
Oh, another comment. Wisconsin's better than Nebraska. Also, that also remains to be seen, but
I
we'll
don't.
see.
Yeah, we'll
Like
see.
I've been saying, I haven't seen Ryan, comment all show long. Like I said, Nebraska has the best defense by far that Indiana has seen all year long. They are ranked number 7 in scoring defense. Nebraska does not give up too many big plays.
This season.
So we'll see. Time will tell here probably about another hour.
Wisconsin, though, I don't know. If I'm going to give us a team between Indiana and Wisconsin that I would say is not better than us, but on the same level, it's Indiana. Wisconsin, I think we're a step above this season. I really do.
Yeah, Wisconsin's looked okay the last couple of games, but yeah, that all remains to be seen. And Wisconsin's coming to Lincoln too, so that'll help.
What is if you're grading our season where we're at now from an F to an A, what is your realistic, what is your real, our 5-1, our somewhat inconsistent but pretty consistent play? What is your actual not prediction? What is your actual grade for the Huskers so far?
Through the first 6 games, I give them a solid B+. They've done enough to win these games, and they do it. Like, you look at Colorado. Colorado is quite easily the best offense Nebraska has played this year. I mean, you look at what Colorado has done, and Nebraska controlled Colorado. And look at what Colorado's doing now. They're putting up a lot of points on a lot of teams. So again, Nebraska has a really good defense. You said the Kirk Cinetti is going to whip that ass. We'll see. It remains to be seen. The Badgers will win at least by 10. The Badgers aren't 10 points better than Nebraska. But, again, B+ I think is a solid, rating for them. I think there is room for Nebraska to grow, especially with their freshman quarterback. I think we will see that growth as the year goes on. So yeah, I'm overall very pleased. What about you?
I'm pleased for sure. I'm giving us a B- because of certain inconsistencies I've seen. And it's not even our loss, because again, our loss I don't believe was because we just threw the game and whatever. I also don't believe it was the refs. I saw there was so much. Obviously reffing and that can change the outcome of a game. It can change certain areas of a game. But we just lost that game against Illinois. We just lost. I mean, truly, I believe we just lost that game. But even beyond that, against Colorado, we had a big first half. And then again, there's a strategy, there's a certain way about how we've closed games out in one area, but in another area, we've struggled to put points on the board in the second half outside of a strategy, outside of trying to hold on to the ball, whatever it may be. I really, really want to see us do a better job. I still have it. It's just short. Look at that. I still have it. So no worries. The mullet's still there. If that's what you're saying, I don't know if there's someone else that cut a mullet off that you're referring to. I don't know. But if you're referring to me, bro, it's just not.
Dude, you're getting called out, man.
I am. I didn't even think about the fact that this is the first show I've done with the new haircut. But yeah, it isn't the same. You're not wrong, but don't worry, it'll be back. By the time we get to January, it's going to be already right here, bro. That's how my hair works. It'll be back. Don't worry about it. Just like the Huskers are back, and we're going to be back when we beat Indiana today and Wisconsin. But no, give me B-. I can't go above that. But I also could not have given us a B, even a B- until this season. This is the first season in quite some time I feel comfortable even giving them anything above a C. And I don't even think the Huskers have been playing C football until this season. They've played above that. So give me a B-. We're getting a bowl game. Again, I mean, we haven't gotten that sixth win yet, but it would be disappointing levels of it'd be insane. There's no way we're just losing out the rest of the season. That is not happening. So I feel confident saying we're getting our bowl game. And was Tennessee our last bowl game?
Yeah, it was the Music City Bowl against Tennessee in 2016.
Dude, that is insane because like some teams are not upset, but disappointed when they don't even make like a conference championship several years in a row or something. We've been completely out of it all. We've been out of even bowl game.
Yeah, you look at longest bowl droughts, and Nebraska has the longest bowl drought at seven seasons right now.
That's not true.
So sitting at 5-1, I think the bet is they're definitely making the bowl game. It's just the question is how hot do they end the season, and do they end up in Detroit, or do they actually end up in a warm, sunny place known as Orlando, or something like that, playing a decent bowl game?
Man,
So
we'll see it. I think we'll see it. I really do. This Husker team is different. And before we move on, because obviously we've got some other things to touch on before we end our show that aren't Husker football, but some other things to touch on with Husker football is I do really, really, really believe that this team, I don't know. I don't think this is a fluke season. I do think that this team is back. I don't want to say the Huskers are back and sound ridiculous and sound this and that, but I have never bought into the hype. I've never. You know what? Now that the playoffs have been extended to 12 teams, it is a little bit more of if you don't make that push, especially if you're a historic team like the Huskers, because let's be honest, the Huskers are a historic team. They're a more historic team than Indiana and Wisconsin, without a doubt, because have we had that success in about 20 plus years? No, but we had plenty of it before. So I agree, Ryan, that is a good point. And a bowl game is not a tell of success, especially since you only need a six wins to get in most cases. So I can agree with that, but I think Nebraska's legit. I don't think Nebraska is just going to be a bowl game team. I think we're going to see them finish within the top 20.
I think within the next few years of Dylan Raiola, I think they're going to be in contention for the playoff. I think they're going to be right up there, in the Big Ten race too, because they've been recruiting at a pretty high level. They're in the running for numerous 5-stars in this recruiting class too. If they could pick up a few of those game-changing recruits and develop them, Nebraska is going to be right back up in the conversation that they were, 30 years ago. So
yeah, we're making our way back. That's all that matters.
So it'll be interesting. An interesting conversation, over the next, couple of seasons. See how Dylan Raiola. Nobody wants to live in Nebraska. Okay, bro, you just hate. Nebraska's great, man.
Oh, that's funny. Nobody wants to live in Nebraska. Well, guess what? Some people do want to live in Nebraska. Some people would rather live in Nebraska than Hawaii. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna leave. I'll let you connect the dots on who's saying that. But Nebraska has a lot of good qualities. But I get it. If you've never been there and you just know it for certain things or for nothing, perhaps, then that's a fair assessment. But no, Nebraska, come on now. Nebraska, we got Raiola to switch from Georgia to Nebraska, which I don't think that was the place. That was probably the money, but it's okay.
All 1,800 people who live in the state. There's like 1 million people
Wyoming,
that live on the east side.
That's Wyoming. Come on, we're not Wyoming.
There's 1 million people that live in the Omaha metro alone. Come on now.
No, I think he's thinking of Wyoming. That's okay. We're not Wyoming. We've got
better armpit.
Football, better everything. So it's okay.
Oh gosh, the armpit of America.
It's okay. I don't think Ryan, are you an Indiana fan, or are you just giving us a little bit of because I want to know if you're an Indiana fan, because we got to retouch on this when they beat you guys, if that's the case. If you just are hating on Nebraska, that's different. But no. Well, Nebraska will have more to talk about next show, and we actually have. You've never been here. Check out a Nebraska waterfall or what Chimney Rock.
Yeah.
I don't know if that can.
I would never live in California. There are too many fruits, flakes, and nuts that live in that state. So, um, but
Well,
yeah, let's go ahead and move on from the Nebraska topic.
so we are moving
Oh,
on. Yeah, we're moving on from Nebraska topic.
we'll move on to our predictions for our top, one or talk about the teams in the top 1 to 12 in the rankings right now.
Yes. So we've
Um,
got do you have it pulled up or I have it pulled
yeah,
up?
I've got it pulled up. So
Read it off.
in the AP top 25, top 12, number 1 Texas, number 2 Oregon, number 3 Penn State, number 4 Ohio State, number 5 Georgia, number 6 Miami, number 7 Alabama, number 8 LSU, number 9 Iowa State, number 10 Clemson, number 11 Tennessee, and number 12 Notre Dame. But here's the thing too. So with the 12 team playoff, the top ranked group of 5 team also gets in. So it's not necessarily the top 12. So we can rattle through like teams that we think will make it in the top 12, but we also need to throw in who's going to be the top group of 5. Is it going to stay Boise State, or is it going to be the likes of an Army or a Navy? So we'll have to throw that in as well. Who do you think is going to be, say, the mainstays, like say in that top 10? And then who do you think the potential, like say another at-large power bid, and then who's the group of 5 team that you have getting in?
Well, I of the teams that are currently in top 12, I definitely don't have all of them falling in that top 12 category when it's all said and done. First of all, Texas, I've already talked about Texas plenty. Said I think they're going to go undefeated. Said I think they've got the best shot of being that number 1 team, and I'm sticking with that. And then right behind them, and now beyond this number 1 spot, I'm not going to give these teams where I think they'll be. I just think they'll be in the top 12. So Texas, I think, stays 1. You know what? I will say Oregon, I think, stays 2. I think Oregon and Texas are those 2 undefeated teams. Penn State is going to remain in that top 12, but I don't think they'll remain. I believe they're undefeated still. I could be wrong. Maybe
Yeah, they are.
A loss. I don't think they stay undefeated. I do think they'll pick up a loss at that Big Ten, that the end of their schedule. I do think they pick up a loss in that, but I think even with a loss, they'll probably only get bumped down bottom half of 8 to 10, maybe. I don't even think they'll get bumped. I think their floor will be 6 or 7 or 7 or 8 by the end of the season. Ohio State, I think they stay in. I don't think they drop out. Hold on. Pause before I got to read this. I'm slow at reading comments. You know what? I'll take it. I'll take it. It's okay. It's good to be back. Speaking of NBA, we will have Will be on the arc at some point, but we don't know quite when. But it's good to be back talking college football, and I guess I'll take going from 45 to 19. I'm not sure about the gas station attendant, but you know what? It's okay. Gas station attendants seem like pretty cool, so it's okay. I'll take it. It's a pretty good look. That should be my Halloween costume. 19-year-old gas station attendant. I don't even have to buy anything, apparently. I look the part. But no, it's good to be back. And back to what I was saying, I think Ohio State will keep that spot. It is yes, I agree. It is great. It is great to have a college football show. It's good to represent more sports for sure. That's the goal. Ohio State, I think, keeps it. Miami is another team I see keeping in the top 10. I can see them possibly bumping down a little bit, but I think they'll keep their spot. I don't see Miami dropping. And then that last team that I see keeping it is LSU, and they could use it. LSU has been a team that's been pretty lackluster the last few years. Ever since they won that championship, it seems like someone at that university sold their soul for a championship, because they went from being the best team and looking like an NFL caliber team, like in several positions. Now they did lose some players to graduation, but LSU dropped off hard after that season with Joe Burrow.
After 2019. Yeah, that was 2019.
So it's been 5-6 years now almost where they've just been kind of a mid-level team. So give me LSU turning it around and not being that mid-level team and actually staying in. And then I will say, um, one thing I will also say is I think if I'm picking a team right now that I think also is like solid, I think I was calling it earlier. I think Iowa State, honestly. I think if I'm gonna sit here and talk about how I think Iowa State is another team I can see being pretty. I don't want to say a shoe-in, but I can see them. I do see them winning out and having success the rest of their season and possibly being like they're 9 right now. I see them maybe finishing 8 or 7. Between 7 and 9, I can see. And then a team that's kind of on the outside of that 5 team, I think Boise State. Boise State is boasting a team that, again, it is great when we see. It is great when we see these teams that have history, because does Boise State have as much history as like a Nebraska or a Texas? Absolutely not. But they have history. They
Yep.
do have history. And they do, when they're a good team, seeing that ridiculously colored home turf, seeing a good team play on that, it's fun to watch. So I think Boise State's going to get in, but I think Boise State's going to be one of that bottom half, like an 11 to a 12 possibly, maybe a 10. Alabama, I don't think stays in. I think Alabama is going to be right on the outside looking in, possibly.
Yeah.
But we know Alabama. We know how they are with Alabama. If it's like a close, if there's a team they're going to pick that's like there's all these teams with the same record, they're going to pick Alabama. So if it comes down to that, I think we will see Alabama. But bro, your Cowboys need more than just that. Your Cowboys need everything. You need a new quarterback. You need a new everything. So we'll get back to you on that. We'll look at who's in the upcoming draft and let you know how many players you need to draft. But we
I
already
don't.
know that Jerry Jones won't make the right call. He never does. But anyways, that's not the same. That's not the same.
Quinshon Judkins is the man. He is the man. He's really good. Um, as far as the Dallas Cowboys question, I think they're going to need a whole lot more than good defensive tackles. They might need a new owner at this point. Um, it's pretty bad there, Dallas. I kind of feel bad. Um, but yeah, we'll go over potential draft prospects as we get late in the season for you.
There'll be some big ones for sure. This is going to be a pretty exciting year in a couple positions. But who do you have though? Switching over to you for these teams that are going to make that push or stay in that spot in that 12.
So I think your mainstays are going to be Texas. I think Texas will run through and win the SEC. I think Oregon wins the Big Ten. I think Penn State is going to find their way to stay in too. Ohio State, I could see Ohio State potentially falling to the bottom half. I don't think they're going to fall the way out, but I think they're going to fall to one of the bottom seeds. They could possibly win it or lose another game the remainder of the year. They haven't exactly been consistent, even though they have quite arguably the better roster of anybody in college football. You've got Georgia. Georgia, I could see falling to the bottom half as well. They could lose, another game, finish 10-2. Miami, I think, will stay in. Alabama, I think, falls out. I think they'll be on the outside looking in. LSU, I have staying in that conversation. Iowa State is kind of an interesting conversation piece. Iowa State's really good. 6-0. They've looked extremely sharp on offense and defense. The question is, if they lose, when is the loss, or when in the season will the loss come? Will the loss hurt them enough to keep them out? As of right now, I'll keep Iowa State in. And then I'm gonna keep Clemson in that conversation too. I think Clemson will stay in the playoff conversation as well. As far as the at-large bid, Boise State is pretty awesome to watch. Their running back Gianti is incredible. He's putting up, Barry Sanders type numbers at running back, which is absolutely crazy. He's quite easily the Heisman front runner right now. And then you've got the likes of Army and heck, even Navy. I'm gonna go with a little fun prediction here. I think Army sneaks in as the top group of 5 team to make it in. Um, and then give me Tennessee. Give me Tennessee in the playoff as well.
Tennessee, that's a good pick. I think Tennessee, honestly, I forgot him. I forgot him. I forgot to put him in there because Tennessee, I think, could be a team that could make that last few game push and maybe get in. And maybe they win, like you alluded to earlier in the show. Maybe they do beat. Maybe they do beat. What am I saying? Maybe they do beat um, Alabama and then go on a little bit of a run, and we see them closer to that top 8 in the end. We could see that happen for sure, but I definitely can see them possibly being in eventually.
Yeah.
I definitely can see them making that push and being a team that gets that, because we've seen them fizzle out. We've seen Tennessee fizzle out and really, really, really just kind of go up and down, top to bottom, and not really remain a consistent force. I think that might change this season. And even though I'm picking them to drop the Alabama game, I still think that Tennessee could be that team and be a lot better and really make a push. So that's kind of who we have for that. Could there be any other teams? I mean, a BYU could absolutely find themselves in that talk. Clemson, currently sitting at 10th, could find themselves in that talk. Looking down closer to 25, Navy or Army, honestly, also could
That
be
was
a sleeper team, possibly. I could,
what
and that would be. Imagine they both. Is there a reality where they both get in?
I if they're both undefeated going into their matchup in December, there's a possibility. And talk about a crazy story.
Insane.
And yeah, is Mark a Packer fan? I would have never
Oh,
agreed to this if I had known that. Yes, sir. Go Pack, go, man. Go Pack, go.
whatever. Y'all are doing better than my team right now. I can't even say anything. So I'm not even going to say anything about my team. But that's okay. But no, I definitely think there could be some parity. I think we could see a Navy or an Army. I think shout out. Let's talk about the 12 team lineup. I love it. I definitely think we are going to see some of the most exciting football that we have seen, both across the board in any level, college, pro, high school. I honestly think adding more teams is the best thing they could have ever done. And I think we will see, and also shout out to adding more teams, because I think a team like
Yep.
the Huskers could have a bid within the next 2, 3, 4 seasons
Yeah.
because there's 12 teams. Now, even with a 4 to 6, even if with an 8 team, could we still obviously be in the mix, of course. But I think that 12, adding those 12 teams, we've talked about it on the Connor and Heffernan show before, and we were both kind of not super, we weren't against it, but we weren't super for it. But I am more for it now than I have been, because I think we're going to see so much parity and so much excitement that we've been missing from
Well,
college football. Because playoffs with just a handful of games that don't take more than a couple days to finish, it doesn't feel the same as an actual playoff field with different games, different days, and you're watching all these different teams, and this team might upset this. It's not the same. We're going to see parity. We're going to see possible, not upsets because these are top 12 teams, but you know what I mean. We're going to see some action that we have never seen in college football. So I think it's going to be the best. I think this is the best season of college football overall across the board in such a long time.
yeah, the parity in the sport now is crazy because you're seeing some of these other teams that you otherwise wouldn't see. In this conversation, I'm like, you look at Iowa State. Iowa State is 6-0 and they're number 9 in the country right now after a otherwise pretty disappointing year last year. And a lot of that has to go with, the job in the transfer portal. The transfer portal has become a pretty big thing. It's kind of free agency for college football. You've got name, image, and likeness where players can actually make money off of their own likeness. And, they go to the schools with the better NIL. So you're seeing schools like Nebraska pick up some of these, higher profile kids because they can make more money. It's evening the playing field throughout the whole sport, and it just makes things way more exciting rather than just having the, mainstays win it every year. So there's potential we'll see, several different winners in the 12-team playoff.
Oh yeah, no, it'll
Throughout
be
the
exciting.
years.
I'm ready for it, man. I'm ready, and I'm also ready for bowl season. I think bowl season is going to be more interesting this year. I think everything top to bottom stuff is looking up for college football. So
Yeah.
we will retouch. I mean, we've got plenty, even though we're starting kind of in the middle of the season, we still have plenty of touch-ins with that top 12, and we might even extend it and go top 16 or above when we look at it next. So that kind of wraps up that segment. We're going to move on and talk a little Heisman. Obviously, there's plenty of football left, and we'll talk other awards too. Probably not today, but we will have some other award talks and other shout outs. But for today, we're going to give our top 3 Heisman list currently. If you are watching this show live and whenever you hop in, if you ever want to give your own lists, your own opinions, your own anything, or you want to roast us and say that one of us looks like a 19-year-old gas station worker, absolutely. Any comment, all comments welcome. So that being said, let us hear your either top Heisman pick or your top 3 Heisman picks in the comments right now if you're watching us. Starting off for my top 3, coming at number 3, I've got to go with a Colorado player, Travis Hunter. Obviously, he's a dual threat. Now, he did go down against, Kansas State with a shoulder injury, but I heard that he's predicted to play today, or at least predicted to play within the next 2 games. And Travis Hunter, it's kind of interesting because the team he is on is obviously not the best. But you look at a team like Florida State, and that dude definitely made the right pick, not going to Florida State and not picking several other schools. As mid-tier as Colorado is, I actually think Travis Hunter is able to develop his game the best at this school. So I think we are going to see Travis Hunter go into the NFL and be one of the craziest, best players we've ever seen and continue that both side of the ball level play to some extent in the NFL. But the reason I have him at 3rd, I would maybe have him at 2nd. I can't really put him over who I have at 2nd. But the reason I have him at 3rd is because of the team he's on. And I can see them several games they have remaining. I can see him not having as productive of games, but then other games they have remaining, I can see him just going off if he's healthy. So definitely, I think he's going to stay in my top 3, but he's definitely my number 3 pick because of their record and also his health. I don't know when he's going to be back. It sounds like he's not missing a large amount of the season, but it does sound like he could miss today's game maybe. But if he plays today or the next game and on, I think he'll stay in that top 3 conversation. Who's your number 3 right now?
Oh, my number 3 right now would have to be Travis Hunter. I would have to agree. Travis Hunter is one of the best two-way players in college football that I remember seeing. I don't even remember seeing a two-way college football player in my lifetime anyway. Really solid player, but with the injury, you don't know how he's gonna come back from it. So yeah, I would currently pin him at number 3. I do think when he gets to the NFL, he might have to choose whether he wants to play offense or defense. I don't think he's going to be able to play two-way in the NFL, and I think he's a better defender than he is a receiver for sure.
For sure. I think it'll also depend on what team he goes to in the NFL, what team drafts him. I don't think he'll play full both sides of the ball, but I think we'll see a Deion Sanders thing where he does have some games where he gets some offensive snaps. Because you did see Sanders get some pretty, not a lot, but you see on his resume, there definitely are some offensive touchdowns. So let's go. See, there we go. There we go. Which one am I, though? Which one am I 1? Are you putting me at 1? Because I don't know.
Dude, you're a Heisman favorite.
I don't know if my rush game is up to. I don't know. I'm not sure. But hey, I appreciate it, bro. Let's go. A little support for the for the Heisman race. Coming in at number 2, I've got Cam Ward.
Okay.
Too soon to tell. That's fair. Coming in at number 2, I got Cam Ward. Cam Ward, we were talking about him earlier in the show.
Yep.
He by far is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback, I would say, in the league. What has kind of overshined that is his team has been a little inconsistent on the other side of the ball, and they've had some inconsistencies, but I still believe in him, and I still think that he is the best quarterback. I think he will finish the season as the best quarterback, both statistically and just what he's able to do. I think he definitely will be in the top talk. So I don't have him as my number 1, but give me Cam Ward as number 2 and decently comfortable. I know I said if Travis Hunter was healthier that he would be maybe my number 2 spot, but I wouldn't put him above Cam Ward. I still wouldn't put him above Cam Ward. And at the end of the day, yes, we've seen defensive players win this award, but it's very rare. And like you said, Travis Hunter is in my personal opinion as well, a more notable defensive player. So I think Cam Ward being the player he is, and since he's a quarterback, I don't see him losing out to Travis Hunter for this award. But one thing I will say, going back to Travis Hunter, I know we're talking about Cam Ward now, is I honestly think that Travis Hunter could, if he comes back and is healthy, could go on a tear for the rest of the season and put up video game numbers, because he already has been doing that. Even just the number of snaps the dude is playing is insane, and you don't really see that. You don't see that at all. So, and a mullet intervention, it's a little too late for that, guys. I would have needed that a few weeks ago. I think it's too late for the mullet intervention, but like I said, it grows back fast. It'll be back. It's peeking out right now, but it's coming back. But no, I do think that Cam Ward is comfortably above Travis Hunter. Who do you have at number 2?
I've got Dylan Gabriel.
Oh, okay.
I really like what Dylan Gabriel is doing. He's 174 for 226, 77% completion percentage, 2,080 yards, 15 touchdowns, so only 4 interceptions. He doesn't have quite as many touchdowns as Cam Ward, but I just like how Dylan Gabriel dishes. Like he spreads the wealth when he throws the football. He has a bunch of different targets he can go to, and I do think Gabriel has a few big games in him to where he can kind of solidify himself in the Heisman running the remainder of the year.
Do you think Gabriel has a chance to boost himself above that number 2 spot for you, or do you think he'll stay within that 2-3 spot?
It all depends on how well my number 1 pick does the remainder of the year.
We might have the same pick. I don't know.
Yeah, we might. I'll lead us off here.
Lead us off. Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, so I have Gabriel at number 2. I have Ashton Gianti at number 1.
Yes, sir.
What he's doing at Boise State right now is unreal. He has 1,248 rushing yards on 126 carries, which is crazy. That's 10 yards that he's averaging. He's averaging a first down pretty much every time he carries the football, which is nuts to think about. You're 6 games into the season, and I've never seen a running back have over 1,200 yards already. And he had all of last season, in general, like 2023, he had 220 carries for 1,347 yards and 14 touchdowns. He's already at 1,248 yards on 126 carries, man. He is putting up video game-like numbers. Like, this is the type of numbers that I'll put up with my running back in college football 25. Like, it is absolutely crazy. What are your thoughts on this, man? Like, I don't think I've seen a running back put up numbers like this ever.
No, definitely not. What I will say before I get into all of this, Smoke, thank you for tuning in. I don't think I need to tell Maddie that Dak blows. I think he already knows. I think this season is proof enough. I think this is the most proof he's ever seen that he blows. So, but thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Mark, since you're new to live streams out here, Smoke will tune in and usually throw that around or throw something around each live stream. So
Cool.
appreciate it always. But back to Heisman pick. My number one is the exact same. This dude, I don't know if we've ever seen it like historic wise, someone with this many yards at this point of the season. I was looking at graphics of like Derrick Henry, like these top level like 600, 500 yards, 700 yards max at this point of the season, not this
1,200 yards.
insanity and averaging what he's averaged. And this dude, when I look at him, I'm like, this dude could be a problem in the NFL for defenders. Like, this is the type of player that is, I don't want to say ready for the league, but like he would be a problem even in the league. I feel like I really do because of what he's doing in college and he's setting himself apart. And he's not the only reason that we're talking about Boise State, because if he was, we wouldn't be talking about Boise State like we are, but he's one of those big factors. And when you see a player that's averaging pretty much a first down each run, that's a player you want on your team, and that's a player that's making a difference. So we have yet to see him be shut down fully in a game. He is, if he continues playing like he is, I think there's no way he loses that. I think he is the Heisman winner no matter what.
He's a cheat code. He's the equivalent to, Tecmo Bowl playing as Bo Jackson. You can't catch him on the football field. You can literally run the whole clock out with him. Like he's crazy. I've done that a few times too and pissed a couple of my friends off, but that's beyond the point. But yeah, the type of numbers that Junkies pulling up though it's unheard of. 6 games into the season, he's already almost to 1,300 total yards. He has a chance to be at 1,500 yards by the time today is done. Like, it's unreal. It is unreal. And if he's not at the top of everybody's Heisman list right now, I don't know who would be. It's just absolutely crazy, man.
It is. It is. Once again, before we move on, if anyone wants to give their Heisman opinions, if you have a different pick than our list, or you just have a guy that you think is it, let us know. One more thing I want to say Heisman-wise before we move on. Do you think that a player like a Shedeur Sanders still has a chance to have his name? Because obviously I think he's in the top 5 for statistics quarterback-wise in a lot of areas. Do you think a quarterback such as him still has a chance of getting his name in there?
I think it's possible. I think they're going to need a lot of big games out of him. Like, you look at his stats, pretty solid, 172 for 237. So that's a 72.6% completion percentage, 2,018 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. So he takes care of the ball. He doesn't put the ball in jeopardy. So yeah, I imagine like down the road when we start talking more about the Heisman and how, if once the list becomes solidified, I wouldn't be shocked if his name is up there, especially if Colorado has a pretty good record.
Which I think they can, looking at their record really quick. Obviously, we're not going to touch on them too much, but looking at who they play a very low caliber Arizona team that's not anything special today. And then they play Cincinnati. Cincinnati's currently 4-2, and Cincinnati's always a team that's pretty legit. And then they play Texas Tech.
Yep.
And then we've got Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. First of all, definitely think they're going to a bowl game without a doubt. But I don't see them winning more than 7 games. I think they'll win. I definitely think they'll beat Arizona today, but I see them losing to Cincinnati and Texas Tech back to back. But then with those last 3 games against Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State, I definitely think they'll pull off at least 2 victories out of there. So I think they'll be a 7-8 win team. But that's not that record is what they go off for Heisman, but that's not going to be a Heisman winning quarterback with a 7-8 win team and just more than likely finish unranked, I would guess. But definitely better. I mean, shout out to that team for turning it around after that Nebraska loss and not just picking up loss after loss after loss. Obviously, they've picked up losses since then, but they easily could have that could have been the season. They could have lost to us and then just crumbled and folded, especially because of why they lost to us. But it looks like they really have improved certain areas and are a better team. So shout out to Colorado. I think they're going to win today. Not that we're talking about them too much, but I think they'll win today pretty handily, whether Travis Hunter is in or not. And I think, like you said, he's going to have some big games. Even in the games they lose, Sanders has had pretty big games. So I think he will possibly put his name in that top 5 by the end of the season, possibly, but he will not be in that top 3. And we'll definitely revisit Heisman. Possibly not next episode because that'll probably be right next week, and we probably won't have too much of separation by then.
Yeah.
But if there's any big change, we will cover it, and we will definitely cover Heisman predictions and standings in a couple of weeks. But moving on, this is really our last planned segment of the show. If we get any comments or anything that keeps us going for a little bit longer, we definitely will go, or if we get any news. But if you watched Well Beyond the Arc, you know that we like to do a few different special segments, and I think we're going to add some to this show as we go. One of them, though, is top 5s, and I really, really enjoyed doing them. This could be top 5 best players of all time, worst players, most underrated teams, so on and so forth. So every single show, we're going to do a top 5. Today's is a little bit of a homer pick, I will be honest, but it's because I wanted to pick. I wanted to start with a little bit of some Husker love. So our first top 5 of the College Football Junkies is the top 5 Husker teams of all time. What I want to preface before we get into that is, in our comments, let us know what top 5 you want to hear next, because we want to do the top 5s that you guys want to see. So let us know if there is a top 5. It could be from your favorite team. It could be anything. Let us know what top 5. But before we... Okay, well, we already touched on this. I don't believe that Matt Rule is a is a professional coach. He is a team builder.
In
And
college.
what I will also say is, look who he has in Raiola. Look what quarterback he has now and what he's done so far this season. So if we're talking about a coach and quarterback success, I get what you're saying. That's a point that is fair and fine, but I mean, I do really think that Matt Rule was built to be a college coach, and so just doesn't always work. That is my... Okay, that's pretty good. Top 5 quarterbacks Matt Rule ruined. That's a great list, Ryan. I think we'll save that one. We'll save that until maybe the end of the season. But it's not a bad one. Not a bad
That's
idea.
funny.
But shout out to Ryan. We appreciate your comments, keeping us laughing, keeping us going. Honestly, that keeps this type of thing a lot of fun. So thank you for keeping us laughing and keeping us going this show. So let us know any top 5s. We'll put a pin in the top 5 quarterbacks Matt Rule ruined for now. But any other suggestions we'll look at as well. Starting our list off, top 5 Husker teams of all time. Starting at number 5, I am going with the 1983 Huskers. This was an undefeated regular season team, but they did end up falling in that championship game. But this was a really, 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 I don't want to say turning point for the Huskers because they had that success in the 70s, but this was really when they started looking like a team that was going to be who they ended up being in the 90s. So that 1983 team was special, and the scoring on that team and the offensive talent we boasted, I don't think we've seen, like, that is a special, not even just for the Huskers, as an entire college football, that was a special team. So
Yeah.
give me the 1983 Huskers for my number 5 spot.
My number 5 is also 1983, and you rattle off some of the talent on that team. You had the likes of Heisman Trophy winner Mike Rozier. You got Irving Fryer and Turner Gill, and that's a team that averaged well more than 50 points per game. And the 1982 defense was actually a little bit better than the 83 defense, but why does defense matter when you're still beating teams by over 30 points a game? It's kind of a crazy team, and they were literally, if Tom Osborne didn't go for 2 when they were going for, they scored late in the game against Miami, and Tom Osborne famously went for 2 instead of going for 1 and taking it to overtime. Had they gone for 1, I think Nebraska probably would have won the 83 championship against Miami that year.
Agreed. Oh yeah.
But yeah, this team was definitely the turning point, as far as where this Nebraska team was going under Tom Osborne. So yeah, very, very exciting team. to watch, especially if you go on YouTube and watch some of the highlights. Definitely one of the more electric offenses I think this sport's ever seen by far.
Oh, without a doubt. Dynamic and special. Like just a special team. And the highlights, I mean, obviously highlights from the 80s aren't the best quality, but you can find some highlights that are super insane and impressive and just show you exactly who we were. Coming at number 4, I have the 1997 Husker football team. This was Coach Osborne's last team and also another, I mean, undefeated regular season and a championship. And honestly, I struggled to put this one this low, but because of some of the other ones that I put up there, I had to put it at this number 4 spot. But that 1997 team was special. I mean, all 5 of these teams are special, and only one of them isn't a championship winning team. So that's got to be some signification. Like that's got to signify who we're talking about here. So obviously, the Nebraska back and forth in the comments. I get it, and we've not been a team that's been great, but when we read these teams off, it just goes to show that the Huskers definitely have been a football legacy school. And I think we're not to keep going back to this, but I think we're right back on our way there. So that's my number 4. What do you got?
I've got 97 as well. It's like you look at, their victory up against a Peyton Manning led Tennessee team. 42-17 is pretty impressive. They obviously had Scott Frost as the quarterback. Amon Green was a hell of a running back behind Frost. Their option game was as good as they have been, in the 90s and hell, I will even say the 80s, because Frost had some of that breakaway speed. You had Amon Green, who was a big back, but he had that breakaway speed too. And we can't forget about the defense. They had Jason Peter and Grant Windstrom. They both earned they were both All-Americans that year. So yeah, it was a very, very solid team. They obviously had that famous play known as the flea kicker up against Missouri to beat them 45-38. So that was kind of another fun moment. Now with number 3 I have 1994. The 94 team was pretty damn awesome. Obviously, they finished the season, 24-17 victory over Miami. They scored, 459 total points that season, only gave up 162 points. They had one of the best defenses and one of the best offenses in the country that year. They had Lawrence Phillips, who was a phenomenal running back and talent that probably would have done a lot in the NFL, but things got in the way of him. They had fullback Corey Schlesinger as well. Man, you just rattle off some of these names, Tommy Frazier, Brooke Berringer, Matt Turman, 3 really good quarterbacks that led this Nebraska team in 94 to an undefeated national championship. It's kind of crazy rattling off some of those names. Hopefully we get some of these teams here in the near future that we start rattling off. It's like, man, that team was so good.
Oh yeah, it's coming. I think we might be in that. This might be this season where we rattle this team off and we talk about remembering the team that brought us back. We didn't share these lists. I don't remember sharing these lists, but we currently have the exact same list. Did I share? I didn't share my list with you, did I? I don't think I did.
No.
I'm going to be interested if we have the exact same top 5 list because currently we do, and that we're on a roll. Yeah, 1994. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. I don't have to say too much more because that was a squad that another undefeated Tom Osborne squad that set themselves apart from other teams, honestly. So that's got to be that number 3. Now we're getting into the best of the best, the top 2 best Husker teams of all time. Who do you got coming in at number 2?
I've got 1971. The last led Bob Devaney team. That was kind of the start of everything at Nebraska. Obviously, they won the previous year in 1970, but 1971 was easily the most dominating team that Bob Devaney had. I mean, they had a defense that only gave up 8.2 points per game, and they had an offense that scored well over 30 points a game. So they were pretty dominating. They had Johnny Rodgers. Johnny Rodgers famously won the Heisman. And 1971 also had the game of the century. They welcomed the second-ranked Sooners, and Nebraska beat them 35-31 in quite the game. And it's still, to this day, one of the greatest games in college football history. What's your number 2? I have a feeling this is where it's going to go.
No, 1971. I got the same exact. I think we have the same exact list. I can't guarantee we have the same number 1, but because of who I have at 1, I feel like we have the same list. So, man, I mean, again, it's so interesting because I feel like people often forget. Okay, this is hilarious. I don't know if you saw this one yet.
1889, yeah.
1889, yeah. You know what? Those were the good old days, man. Those were the glory days.
Oh, the 1800s. How could we forget about the 1800s?
How could we forget
it?
Man, those were the days when the bug eaters, right? Is that what we were? The bug eaters.
Yeah.
Look at this, man. You're a big Husker fan to know all that information, Ryan. We're gonna shout you out every Husker segment now because you know all that Husker information, knowing about the 1980s or the 1880s, not even 1980s, the 1880s team. It's quite a throwback. Well, we're here. We've made it to our number 1 spot. This is where we'll either finish a perfect 5 for 5, not that we were trying to do that list where we're together, or we'll throw it off a little bit. Who is your number 1 best Husker football team of all time?
By far the 1995 Huskers. They're quite possibly the number 1 team ever in college football as far as their stats. It's absolutely crazy. They averaged 53 points a game. They only gave up just over 14 points a game. And by the way, they blew out a damn good Florida Gator team 62-24 in the national championship. So yeah, 95 is easily number 1, and it was one of the more dominating seasons in sports history in general.
Well, this is where we fell off, bro, because I had the 2020 Huskers. What are we doing?
Oh, yeah, the best 3 and 5 team of all time.
What was the record? It's hard to beat. I don't even know what the record was.
Oh, well, in 2020, they were 3 and 5, but they lost all 5 games by 1 score. So, yeah, they were quite possibly the best 3 and 5 team of all time. We're the best, non-bowl winning or bowl going,
even bowl eligible
team of all time. Yeah,
even bowl eligible at that.
And then it was 2021 where it was 3 and 9, and we were the best 3 and 9 team of all time.
Gosh. The records just kept going, but unfortunately, it wasn't that. It wasn't flipped. That 9 and 3 would have been a little bit better. I got the same exact number 1. There's no denying that is the best team. But again, we are, all jokes aside about them being not a very good blah, blah, blah. They have squads that you could put up against a lot of other teams that people might consider the best teams all time, and it would be a battle, and the Huskers might come out on top. So these teams are all but one are championship winning teams, and there has been, I mean, early 2000s, there was a little, we had a little bit of a push like early, but since the 90s, since we left that Osborne era, we just have not been the same team. And it's annoying saying that because that's been 30 plus years. It's been a long time. And so saying that is okay, it's getting a little, but we're not saying that anymore. You know what I mean? The table's turning. I truly think in Raiola's time, we will see the playoffs. Will we be a championship winning team? Maybe Big Ten at least. Will we be a championship winning team national with Raiola? I'm not entirely sure. It might take some building that goes beyond his time, but I think we have a shot. I think he's giving us our best shot. Rule's giving us our best shot. And beyond just those two dudes, this team is giving us our best shot. So shout out to the Huskers. Before we wrap up, let us know if there's any team, if you're watching live right now, which also if you are tuning in once we are not live anymore, hit those comments up and let us know if there are any top fives or any teams or anything you want us to cover next show. Our plan right now, I believe, is to do a show next Saturday. So we will keep this thing going, and it's great to be out here doing this show. College football is one of our favorite, if not our favorite sports, I would say easily. And so being able to bring you guys a live show covering it is a lot of fun. So we look forward to bringing you guys more of that. Before we tap out, is there anything else, Mark? Any last second segments or anything that you're itching to talk about? Because we want to get it. We want to get off before that 11 kickoff every episode, but we will, if there ever needs to be an extending of the show a little bit, we'll always be happy to do that. So if there's anyone in the comments that has anything that they want to talk about before we call it a show,
Yeah.
we'll go for that. But this has been a great episode 1.
It's been an awesome episode 1. I don't really have anything else to add. We've got a great college football slate. If there's nothing else in the comments, I hope everybody enjoys a wonderful college football Saturday, and we will be back next week to break down next week's games. So yeah, if there's nothing, we will see you all next week.